celluloid, and we're turning it into music and podcast for you.
Welcome everyone to another episode of We Came From Celluloid. I am Nicky P here, as always, with Mr. Brian Pritchard. How are we doing today, Mr. Brian?
Good, man. I feel like I'm starting to resemble myself again. It was last week was fucking weird as hell, but I'm feeling good. I feel good today. Thank you for asking.
That is good. I guess since if I were to give myself one characteristic that I think like just a ball of ambition might be a good way of putting it. And in that, I'm definitely already back to normal. We came back. I'm interrupting you on our Sunday or on your Sunday to go talk about all the crazy ideas I'm having for the future of the band and things I want to do and whatnot. So at least that part of the world is all well and right.
No, those are the best calls to get. I mean, people being enthusiastic, my creative partners like yourself being enthusiastic enough to call is the furthest thing from an interruption. You know what I mean? Like, that's the best phone call in the world. You know, that's shit that can't wait. Love it.
Well, it certainly felt that way to me, and it's funny as you messaged me, you read the bio that's up on the band page, and like as you're like, well, that's gonna be changing soon because I got to fit in all this new lore that goes with the band and like the church and everything, and so it's like the whole thing is gonna be, it's gonna be the same, just a lot more, and I like the idea of it.
Yep, and what we were talking about as far as moving towards the enhanced live presentation, the having video going while we play is one of those things that for as long as it's been something that I've sort of been like, oh, we should be doing that. Like, I really have no excuse. I remember seeing bands do what we're talking about doing as far as just having like just basic, interesting imagery going on behind them, like local bands at the Fantasy and stuff would do that, all the way to one of the most sophisticated versions I remember seeing, but even this was 15, 16 years ago on the local level. There was a band called Second Half where the guitar player singer Ed did all the instruments except drums on the recordings, and so he would accompany himself live on video, right? So like you'd be watching Ed, play guitar and sing, but then like a guitar solo or like harmonies or something would pop up, and the video screen Ed would like it was like fucking Hammond in Jurassic Park where he's like, hello John, hello John, hello John. Yeah, so I don't know what our excuse is. Like, we're a fucking movie band. Of course we should have movie shit going on behind us.
The excuse is I didn't want any more things on my plate for the setup of the show. That's all that is.
That's true. But no, it's that to me is a worthy endeavor. So I'm looking forward to, like, all the gear is still disassembled. Took last Friday off. We got back on Monday from this run. Didn't do anything on Friday. Levante and Noel are back. Part of them being back to normal is being, hard to pin down sometimes as far as getting everybody in the room together. People they have busy lives, and some of our bandmates are at a different place in terms of where their families are at, and the degree to which that responsibility and opportunity to be present just feels a little different. So yeah, anyway, all that to say, I'm looking forward to, I think it's going to be me, Connor, and Jimmy B at least this Friday, at least reassembling my drum kit and you know what I mean, making some noise. So yeah, be good.
Well, I mean, that seems like as good a time as any since since he's going to be playing with us in December, to start getting Max on board a little bit more detailed.
Max is getting his keys to his house this week, but no, that's been on my mind certainly too. We'll pivot to getting him acclimated, but yeah, this Friday wasn't the right starting point. But I'm that those pieces are falling into places. Of course, not to make it about our band that my buddy's getting a new house, but like there is a detail of that, which is, you know, the enhanced home recording studio setup that he's talked about. And indeed that's something that having even proximity to I don't know, it's very exciting to me. I know I've mentioned to you, if not here, certainly elsewhere, that those series of Wednesday hangouts that I was doing, and that I'd love to get back to carving out some time with, you know, again, the new work thing has this noon to 8 block of time that's claimed, at least while I'm in like major training and onboarding mode. But all of this stuff is important to me, and that's where I say starting to feel like more like myself is, you know, continuing to show up every day and do the thing. This new work thing is getting easier, and um, I'd mentioned to you, you know, when we talked last Wednesday, it was less than 48 hours from getting back, and it was like I haven't even processed all this. Saturday morning, after getting through that like coming back work week and stuff, Saturday morning I started going through the footage. And I'm still blown away after now having gone through. I think I still need to watch the Denver Puma set from start to finish. Is maybe the last show I haven't watched. Um, but that's its own different perspective. Is to sit there and go like, what did we actually accomplish on the field of battle, so to speak? You know, and we came away with some great content. That New Haven show in particular, I was just blown away. And that sounds so goofy to say as a participating member, but I'm sitting there just going like, holy shit, this is an exciting band, you know, like who are these guys, you know? And part of it too, I think, was that they had like part of the lighting scheme they had was like electric, you know what I mean? But like it just, the performance was so good. And I was thinking about like when we were talking, and like, but by the end of the trip, I'd almost forgotten about that first day, you know? And not only was the drive short, like us arriving at the Airbnb in Indiana, it sounds so goofy because it was ultimately such a short trip, but it was like we were still so like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed that day. You know what I mean? Like the hangout in New Haven was like, thinking back on it, I was like, oh yeah, that was such like we had stars in our eyes, you know what I mean? Like we hadn't had a single thing go awry. And I think that excitement of playing our first out of state show, like whatever that perfect synergy was, lightning in a bottle got captured. That New Haven show, I'm so glad to have and there's portions of it. I don't know if you went and watched it, but like the framing, Ben started it in one place, and I was occasionally visible, and then at some point you see he goes over and he must have peeked at what he was seeing through the frame, and he moves everything up like 2 feet. And for that then chunk of things, like there's big portions of the video where all 5 of us are in frame and visible, like fucking rocking out. I'm like, got it. This is really good footage of a really good performance. And then at some point, somebody must have bumped the tripod or whatever, where it slides over a little bit, and me and Levante are then gone, and it's you, Nolan Connor, for like those remaining songs, which again, it's like it's not the end of the world, other than I don't mean that in terms of being like, hey, how come I'm not in there? I just thought like it's obviously there's at least a song or two that we could extract a full music video where it's like, fuck, there's all 5 of us crushing that song on stage, and that made me happy. Did you watch the documentary yet? Did you watch the rough cut?
I did watch the documentary. It's what it is, you know. It's I have my questions, but I'm not the director, so it was an interesting. It's certainly an interesting exercise to see someone else's vision of the trip, and that's the other thing. Is like when I'm watching, I kind of have to remind myself that like we are not the subject of the movie really, for as much as like we're a part of it. You know, it's definitely a trip, a documentary of that trip. You know, so there's a lot of other things going on, certainly emotionally with Ben, that you know we got to be cognizant of. So I'm watching this thing. It's like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Okay, we're good.
No, to your point, right? Like there's a world in which a like I think I had even talked to you or Ben or whoever like about the Pantera home video releases that would come out where they'd release an album, they'd go on tour, they'd be, you know, capturing footage throughout the tour, and then they'd release the follow-up to that that would have all the music videos and all this stuff, you know, in there. And so yeah, it's like there's a version of this that, you know, has more performance footage edited and stuff like that. But above and beyond him being, you know, my son and having that bias or, you know, affinity obviously for my child, I was sort of just intrigued to see. It is ultimately a first person perspective documentary from his perspective. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, that's cool. And there's moments in there that made me uncomfortable as the on-screen subject, where I'm sitting there going like, ugh, it makes me cringe a little bit to hear myself talk about myself and about my band so seriously, even though like that's literally what we do here every week too. um like but I wasn't about to sit there and like censor him and be like, yeah, that whole speech where I'm talking about us being like a metal jazz band, like it's like that's way too lofty and I sound like an asshole, please get rid of it. But I sort of figure one way or the other, whether I'm being self-conscious and and you disagree or not, like the overlay is just whatever got captured is real. And so I was thinking about the other side of that of going like, gee, I wonder if Levante's gonna watch this and be like, how come I'm just talking about rim jobs the whole time? And it's like, well, because that's what you do. You know what I mean? Like, right? Like, so the fact that fair enough. But anyway, yeah, like the idea of me sitting there being like, gee, do I really come across this way? And does that make me uncomfortable? It's like, you know, I am who I am. I'm passionate about these topics, but I catch other artists doing that on interviews. And I don't know how much of it's just trying to be humble and self-deprecating or how much of it's you know, honest, but there is, I think, a sense in the world. There's this weird line to walk sometimes in terms of manners, whether you're talking about the self-promotion side or the degree to which you start crawling up your own ass as far as the art of it all. But I'm somebody who likes that shit as a fan. I really do. And I do think about our work seriously. And so, you know, forgive me if I get too lofty.
The thing that I guess I'm happy that it came across is that my very enigmatic nature as far as the band goes, and that how little I am actually in the documentary. So I was excited about that. It's like, ooh,
You stay mysterious? Yeah, yeah,
like I yes, I'm there on stage at all of the gigs, but like past the first day, I don't think you see me hardly at all in the thing. Like it's kind of not around much.
Well, no, to your point, like I remember Ben talking about at one point afterwards being like, you know, I'd had a goal of grabbing like first person interviews with every member and stuff like that. But it was like, yeah, at a certain point, you have the material that you got, you know? Yeah. I liked there was at least one, I think it was with Snowfalls, where he was editing this. Yeah. There was another version. Yeah, but at least the one of it, like, for my ears, in terms of going like, ooh, that was like edited like perfectly, where, you know what I mean? It felt so seamless, flowing from one to the next. And I think I'd mentioned even in the text, I don't mind being an old softy, and I'm sure it hit me differently because, as much as this has been a chunk of your life, it was an even larger chunk of mine, right? That ending shot where it was a shot that was actually being reused. The ending slow motion montage that he did, I don't know that there were any shots in there that I hadn't necessarily seen. Maybe there was like a hug or two that was uniquely put in there, but literally that final slow motion shot where it was panning over to the television, and it's me and Levante back at our first show in 2005, and the moment on stage that you see is sort of he's bouncing and he's turning to look at me, and you see me all intense, like swinging at that little jerk symbol. And something about just that, millisecond, you know what I mean, in slow motion captured, um of the connection between Levante and I, of the reminder of just how long I've been going out on stage with that try hard fucking attitude, Um, I've been showing up hoping that people give a shit for a long time, you know what I mean? And uh I don't know, there was something emotional about even that reminder of like, yeah, God, we've been all getting together and doing this fucking thing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, it's been such a special, huge part of my life. So yeah.
Well, and definitely the documentary, like there's a lot of that. I mean, even was it in Chicago the one day, we're watching videos of you and Max, and like, I mean, there's video of Connor. I mean, that's not Connor. Connor, it doesn't look like Connor. Connor hasn't ever looked like that I can imagine. Or wow, look at that part in Noel's hair. What year is this? 99? Oh my god. And it's more funny because it's like nobody probably has more of a sense of this than me, being the outsider to the group, because you guys have been around each other for forever. Like I'm watching those videos, um once again as an outsider, thinking, where was I at in 1999? I'm a little punk rock kid listening to Blink 182 and a bunch of bands that you've never heard of, in a town in a different state, playing a taco shop for gigs and punk houses. And the number of lives that I will have lived by the time you and me ever even cross paths is silly. Like, all the changes that happen. So like I'm watching this. I guess that there's a stability in your life that like feels weird to me, that like you've had the same people around you helping you for a really long time. And by the way, like when I think about my tenure with the band and like working with you guys, it feels like a long time to me. And then to stretch that out, it's like 3 times as long for you at least. Like just the performing side of things. There certainly was an emotional element to that for me. Like it's like, wow, like, it's awesome that you guys have had this thing your whole life. And all the same dudes are still around. I have never had anybody in my life that's not like my brother or sister or parents. It's been in my life for that long a period of time. Honestly, aside from like maybe our mutual buddy Luke, who I met in the podcasting world, I don't know anyone who's been in my life that long. Most of my college friends moved on. Most of my high school friends stopped talking to me for political reasons. It's like, so it's certainly a different perspective when we look at like the world and performing stuff. And it's funny, it's like I think you and me end up arriving at very similar places by the time we kind of met each other, but like the very divergent paths that put us together is certainly interesting.
Dude, even Jay Bombalicki, okay, is somebody that I've known since for 30 years, right? The guy that hosted us in Denver. Jay was a driver before any of us. He somehow had a trunk full of fucking cartons of cigarettes. You know what I mean? Where like Jay was a fun kid to go get in trouble with, and so that side of seeing the life that he built for himself in Denver, and like he'd had a near death experience at one point. He'd had like a skin infection thing that had him hospitalized, and had he'd been close to death, and had managed to recover. And I said it that final night where I was given a quick thank you speech, where it was just like, yeah, the fact that Levante had preserved that relationship. He's an interesting guy too, in that he's got more than one of those circles, right? Because he's been part of our musical life, and he is part of our circle of friends, but
he's a beautiful snowflake that's part of a lot of circles of friends.
yes, and I think in part because he didn't ever get into the I guess, to be blunt, the drugs as much as we did. You know what I mean? I think that part of our life turned him off.
It's funny you mentioned that. Because there was definitely a few moments where, like, as I say, we had very divergent paths. Like, there is a certain amount of, I definitely wouldn't have hung out with you guys in high school. Like, no chance of that. Like, the extent to which you guys apparently were involved in quote unquote the drug use was definitely more like, I met you guys all as like adults, mostly with your shit together. And so like the idea of like, wow, that's some pretty hard and heavy drug use for like these guys I know.
Yeah, I mean, I dare say from certainly how it felt on the inside, I always had my shit together. Only meaning, I was never really interested in destruction. As much as I've had depressive moments, like, I do value my life. You know what I mean? And it was always coming from a place of just having fun with my buddies. Like, as much as like LSD can be a scary thing for people, and I've learned the hard way not to casually recommend it. Like, go ahead, give it a shot. You know what I mean? I've had incredible bonding experiences with those guys that I'll never forget. And there is this sense of amplification. At the risk of endorsing drug use, it's sort of like, even something as simple as weed. That's the joke that my friends always have teased me about, was that the Jon Stewart character from Half Baked is sitting there in rehab, and he's fascinated with how everything is cooler when you're high. It's like that. You ever look at the back of a $1 bill? Pretty cool, right? You ever see it on weed? Like, that's the big joke, right?
Well, and I don't want to paint myself as a prude, even though I really am in certain ways. It's just a lot of that stuff I never did until I was like in my 30s, and kind of, it was strictly from an experimental, like, hey, let's do it, very one-off, maybe twice sort of things. But one of the things I do, as you mentioned, it's like, and it's maybe one of another reason why me and Levy have always kind of gravitated to each other in the band, is just like, you know, being slightly different in that place. I'm gonna be honest. And the one word that like was Max talking about math, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, math! Like understanding from my world, it's like that's one of those lines you just don't cross.
Well, so even you're right. You know what's weird about that stuff. When I think back on it, is the sort of odd circumstantial thing. So this is something again I don't say with like in any kind of bragging way. It's just my observation. I grew up in an affluent town. And within that affluent town, our modest middle class household didn't compare to the actual wealth that existed in the town of Bay Village. It's a very affluent town. And it was interesting to see how that carried over into the amount of hard drugs that were available. And when I do talk to people that were from any other fucking city, that they'll hear these stories and be like, really? Yeah. But I'm sitting there going like, yeah, the number of like heroin is one thing I have never touched and never would. Not from some like high ground stance, but really because of the relationship I have with addiction in its many forms, right? When if I watch a movie that feels good, if I eat a fucking dessert that tastes good, I'm not even finishing it before I'm thinking about how soon can I again? How soon can I be this again and again and again? And but like there were kids at Bay High that got sent away to rehab for heroin, and whether it's that or the meth side, again, it's like no, these are kids that are all coming from privilege that are just really fucking bored. And that's its whole other tangent to go on in the world, because even Bay Village wealth isn't real world wealth, where again, you sit there and go to a city like Manhattan and go, everything I grew up on is dwarfed in comparison to how these people are living, right? Like but yeah, that's its own headline in the world, and that was just one of my early exposures to it, is that like got it. Like there's a sort of weird insidious thing that happens when privileged people get bored. That's where that idle hands becoming the devil's plaything like really plays out, right? Is going wealthy people with too much time on their hands really get into some ugly shit. So
Well, but while you say that, I'm like, don't ever picture this. So, like, I grew up in the poorest county in New York State, like, well known for teen pregnancy, things like all of the things that poor people do, and along with that does go drugs, like without question. It's just my parents did very well to like kind of keep us away from like drugs were never really taboo necessarily, and drinking all that stuff, it was just be responsible was the only rule my parents had. And so it took a lot of the let's go and be rebellious out of doing that kind of stuff. Now mind you, I found out as I went off to college that my dad had been smoking weed with my friends for years behind my like that kind. I also found out like that my dad's life was not so much different than your guys as far as him and his friends went. Like I was very soft compared to like the let's say drug use that my own parents had when I was like before me and after me and stuff. In part because you know what do you do in a place where there's nothing? And certainly my parents grew up in a different age where it was like a lot of that stuff was less taboo. You know,
in a way, like none of it even really appeals to me anymore. I had opportunities on this trip to take mushrooms again twice. And it was like I have no interest in disassembling my brain. I remember the last time I ever took hallucinogens, that was the thing most on my mind, is going, my God, I've been taking for granted all this time that I could take my brain apart and then reassemble it without like fucking something up whilst reassembling. You know what I mean? And the coming back from it all. And I remember just thinking like, damn, I love my life. Like And like I said, it's not like I was consciously ever fleeing from it before, but I was just so struck by the notion of like how bummed out I would be to have that be the end of my story. You know what I mean? Of being like, fuck, what a waste it would be to be like dead on the floor of this cabin. Like, I fucking love my life. You know what I mean? Like, why would I do anything in the way of just being casual about that stuff, and ultimately that invulnerability in its many ways shrinks over time, where you sit there and go like, no, I took it because I wasn't afraid of it. You know what I mean? I didn't sit there. If I watched, this guy here next to me snort a line and all it does is make him more chatty, you know what I'm saying? Then it's like, cool. Like, so I guess, the DARE program shit was a slight exaggeration. It's not like you do it once and you're hooked, or you do it once and you go to the hospital, but also that stuff does happen. And so I've never been the person that like, I don't like operating from a place of fear, but there's also, again, that sense of going, at what point do I want to be so casual with my one and only life? You know what I mean? Like, come on.
There's fear, and then there's fear, and then there's respect, and it's always been a matter of like, there's certain drugs I've never touched because I understand and respect what they do to people, and just thought that those are probably not things that I needed in my life. I've never had any interest in cocaine because I'm too high strung to begin with. The last thing in the world I need is anything that makes your heart race faster. Like, this be a terrible idea. Like, it's
Sometimes I want to find out for myself. I do definitely, back to that idea of the on weed of it all. There's that side too of going, I actually, in my natural state, I'm getting so much input and enjoyment from the world around me that the idea of putting different filters on that experience was certainly appealing, right? Of sitting there and being like, what does it feel like to listen to a song, to play a song, to watch a movie, to you know what I mean, to do all these different things. But for the most part, it wasn't enhancing, and I found that out quickly. My description of the cocaine experience is the initial high and rush that you get in the first like 30-40 minutes of like, I'm like coming up on the thing. That is pretty awesome. The rest of the night is spent chasing that feeling unsuccessfully and spending shitloads of money. And as far as, again, things like the attention span and all of that stuff, like suddenly not being able to watch a movie successfully, you know what I mean? And have it like, and lock in the way that I enjoy. I'm going like, damn, like this fucking drug isn't worth like cheapening the core experiences that I seek out for myself. You know what I mean? In my life. So yeah, anything that didn't make the like great stuff way better, that was immediately out. But the stuff that had potential to make it more interesting or bond with the friends. I mean, the real heady stuff like the hallucinogens, I mean, that created some close connections. Not that those couldn't exist otherwise, but
what's funny is you keep coming back to those ones that like I don't think twice about. Like, oh yeah, man, who doesn't love hallucinogens? Like, I remember the first time I did acid. I'm like, oh, this is what I was always told drugs were supposed to do, and like something finally did it, and was very happy about that. Great 14-hour trip, and I had a blast doing it. It was very mentally freeing in a lot of ways. Like but so it's like, yeah, those hallucinogens are the things I'm thinking of. It's the weird shit. Like, I guess it's more expensive drugs. The stuff. I mean, dude, mushrooms grow in the ground, same as weed. That's not a drug. That's a recipe,
and I guess part of the affluent suburb of it all was just the availability. Like maybe you were constantly around all of the above, maybe not. Maybe if you were, yeah, fair enough. And to me, it's like it's Oh, fair enough. Yeah, and I never liked fucking with pills, but like to have buddies that I knew, liked, and trusted. And I had a very very close friend who, at a certain point, was I don't know, pretty serious about his selling drugs business and his cooking and making. Like, guy lived with chemists and was manufacturing all of this stuff. So like, at least with the sense of going like, well, I know the source, I guess, and I like the guy, I trust the guy. But yeah, it's weird. I mean, people's like that guy ended up in such a better and different place too. You know what I mean? So I'm just glad that everybody walked away from it, and that ends up being the freaky thing. You know, I'm so pleased to see that. I don't feel like my son, I'm not in his mind, but he doesn't strike me as nearly as reckless and out of control as I was, which I appreciate. Even as a young man, he seemed to have a fairly healthy sense of caution as it related to danger. And yeah, so fingers crossed, right? We just
I mean, I'm just extrapolating like you as a parent and how that would frame certain things in a child's life. And I would imagine it's probably similar to where I came up with, like, well, there was never rebellion in doing any of that stuff. So like you can look at it from a more like sober position. It's like, okay, well, if I don't get the rush of, breaking the rules, then it's kind of just another thing, and I can look at it like, oh, this is what it's supposed to do, and it becomes more medicative at that point, perhaps. I don't know that this is the conversation I intended to have today, but it was definitely an interesting conversation, certainly.
well, 3 cheers to staying alive, right?
3 cheers to having kids old enough to go out and put some things out in the world to you, buddy. Yeah, congratulations on that part. Nothing else. To all of you folks out there, have a good one. See you next week.
Celluloid, and we're turning it into music and podcast free.